Arrival at Juman Spaceport. Jeremy Suttle stepped off his shuttle with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The Juman Spaceport sprawled before him like a bustling metropolis in the stars, filled with an eclectic mix of species, each more bizarre than the last. He had expected a quiet arrival at a backwater spaceport, but what greeted him was chaos, a cacophony of voices, flashing lights, and the unmistakable hum of spacecraft engines. As he adjusted his duffel bag on his shoulder, Jeremy couldn't help but feel out of place. He was fresh out of college, armed with theoretical knowledge, but lacking practical experience. His instructor had assured him that humans were in high demand across the galaxy, especially in engineering roles. Yet standing here amidst throngs of aliens hawking everything from exotic weapons to dubious trade deals, he felt like a fish out of water. "Keep your cred chip close," he recalled his instructor's warning. "Don't jump into the first freighter you see. Take your time." The words echoed in his mind as he navigated through the crowd, instinctively clutching his pocket where his cred chip lay hidden. After what felt like an eternity pushing through the sea of bodies, Jeremy spotted a bar that catered specifically to humans, an oasis in this alien landscape. He made his way there, hoping for some semblance of normalcy. The sign above the entrance flickered erratically. The human touch. Inside, he took a seat at the bar and ordered a bourbon. The bartender donned thick gloves as he poured the amber liquid into a glass, treating it like some toxic substance rather than a drink. As he took his first sip, he felt eyes on him, curious glances from patrons who seemed to be sizing him up. "Just here for a drink," he muttered under his breath as he pushed his cred chip toward the bartender for another round. He was determined not to let anyone know how nervous he felt. "Anything else?" asked the bartender, wiping down the counter with an unenthusiastic motion. "A glass of water would be great," Jeremy replied, grateful for something simple amidst all this alien complexity. As he savored his drink, Jeremy couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling that lingered at the back of his mind. He was alone in this vast universe, filled with beings who could easily outsmart or overpower him. But just as he began to drown in self-doubt, a voice broke through his thoughts. "I'll have a bourbon as well," said an alien voice beside him. Jeremy turned to see a peregrine, a species known for their avian features and predatory instincts, seated next to him. She exuded an air of confidence that made him uneasy yet intrigued. "Can you even drink that?" He began to ask, but stopped short when she shot him an amused glance. "It's for you, Terran," she said with a smirk. "I'd like to have a word." Surprised by her directness, yet unable to resist her commanding presence, Jeremy followed her lead as she gestured toward a booth at the back. As they settled into their seats, she pressed a button that erected a privacy screen around them. An unusual but not unwelcome gesture. "You're looking for work," she stated more than asked. "Honest work," Jeremy replied cautiously. "Of course," she said with an air of confidence that made him question her intentions. "I'm willing to pay you double for double the risk." Jeremy's heart raced at her words. He had heard tales about jobs in space, some lucrative but fraught with danger. "What kind of risk?" he asked warily. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowing slightly as if weighing his response carefully. "I need someone who can keep up with my crew's demanding schedule," she explained. "You wear the ring of the college. You must be qualified." He twisted the ring on his finger nervously. It was a symbol of pride but also pressure, a reminder that expectations were high. "What's your ship like?" he queried. Sella smiled knowingly, as if she had anticipated this question. "Come see for yourself." As they exited the human touch, Jeremy felt both exhilarated and anxious about what lay ahead. The ship before him was unlike any vessel he had ever seen. More scrap heap than starship, but Sella's confidence was infectious. "It flies better than it looks," she assured him as they climbed aboard. Inside was surprisingly well maintained compared to its exterior. However, it lacked crew members, an oddity for such a large ship. As they moved deeper into its bowels, Sella stopped before a bulkhead that looked hastily constructed. "Once we cross this threshold," she said solemnly, "there's no turning back." Jeremy hesitated but then nodded firmly. Curiosity outweighed caution at this point. Sella took a breath before revealing more about their mission. "We're transporting medical supplies salvaged from an old hospital ship." He raised an eyebrow. This wasn't what he expected at all. "What's illegal about that?" "It's not illegal per se," Sella explained cautiously, "but it raises questions we'd rather avoid." Jeremy felt conflicted. While helping others was noble, there was something unsettling about smuggling medical supplies under false pretenses. "How long do you need me?" he asked finally. 6 months, she replied without hesitation. He weighed her words carefully. It sounded like an eternity, but also an opportunity unlike any other he'd encountered before. The thrill of adventure beckoned him forward despite his reservations. As they stood in silence, contemplating their next steps amidst flashing lights and distant sounds from outside, Jeremy realized that this moment would define not just his career, but possibly his entire life among the stars. With resolve building within him like fuel igniting in an engine, he finally spoke up. "All right then, I'm in." The job offer. The ship loomed before Jeremy, a hulking mass of metal that looked more like a scrap heap than a vessel meant for interstellar travel. Sella stood beside him, her wings folded neatly against her back, exuding an air of confidence that made him both anxious and curious. Despite its dilapidated appearance, she assured him, "It flies better than it looks." "Right," Jeremy muttered under his breath, still grappling with the reality of what he was about to undertake. He had come to Juman Spaceport seeking adventure and a way to support his struggling family back on Earth, but this was not what he had envisioned. Sella gestured for him to follow her up the ramp, and as he stepped inside, he was hit by a wave of mixed sensations: faint smells of oil and metal, the low hum of machinery, and an overwhelming sense of potential. This was a place where he could put his skills to the test. "Welcome aboard the Aether's Whisper," Sella announced with a hint of pride. "You're about to see what makes this ship unique." As they walked through the narrow corridors, Jeremy noticed the dim lighting and the cluttered workspaces. Various tools were strewn about, and parts were haphazardly stacked in corners. It was chaotic but functional, a stark contrast to the sterile environment of his college's engineering labs. "Let me show you our main issue," Sella said as they approached a bulkhead that looked hastily constructed. "This is where I need your expertise." Jeremy swallowed hard. He could feel the weight of her expectations pressing down on him. "What exactly is wrong?" "The primary reactor has been acting up," she explained. "It's not producing enough power for our upcoming jumps. We need to fix it before we can even think about leaving this port." "Do you have any schematics?" he asked, eager to dive into the problem. Sella nodded and handed him a tablet displaying the reactor's layout. As he scrolled through the diagrams, he felt a rush of adrenaline. This was what he had trained for. He could already see potential solutions forming in his mind. "Your college taught you well," Sella remarked, observing him closely. "But this is no ordinary reactor. It requires a delicate touch." "I'm up for the challenge," Jeremy replied confidently, though doubt gnawed at him internally. Sella's expression softened slightly as she studied him. "I wouldn't have approached you if I didn't believe you could handle it. But I need you to understand, this job comes with risks." "What kind of risks?" Jeremy pressed, suddenly wary. "Let's just say that our cargo isn't entirely legal," she said cautiously. Jeremy's heart raced at her words. "What do you mean?" "It's medicine," she revealed. "Salvaged from an old hospital ship that went missing years ago. We're delivering it to one of our colonies under Terran control." He frowned, trying to process this information. "And you think I'll just go along with this? What if we get caught?" Sella leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. "That's why I need you here. Your presence will make things easier if we encounter any scrutiny." Jeremy felt torn. On one hand, helping those in need resonated with his values, but on the other hand, Participating in something illegal made his skin crawl. "How long do you need me?" he asked finally. 6 months, she replied without hesitation. 6 months felt like an eternity, but the thought of earning enough credits to help his family back home weighed heavily on his mind. He had always wanted to make them proud and relieve some of their burdens. "What's the pay?" he inquired cautiously. Sella smirked slightly at his question. "I'm offering double what you'd earn as an apprentice engineer minus 40 credits an hour for standard time and 80 for overtime." Jeremy blinked in disbelief. That was more than he had ever imagined earning in such a short time frame. His mind raced with calculations. If he worked hard enough, he could send home enough credits to help his family significantly. "Okay," he said slowly, still weighing the implications. "But I want clear terms. No surprises." Sella nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. You'll be compensated fairly for your work and your time." "Fine." Jeremy finally relented, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension wash over him. "I'll do it." "Great!" Sella exclaimed, her demeanor shifting from serious to jubilant almost instantly. "Let's get started then." As they moved deeper into the ship's inner workings, Jeremy felt a sense of purpose igniting within him. This was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to prove himself in ways he had never thought possible. They arrived at the reactor room, a cramped space filled with blinking lights and humming machinery. Sella gestured toward an array of wires and panels that looked like they hadn't been touched in ages. "This is where we'll be spending most of our time," she said with a hint of humor in her voice. Jeremy took a deep breath as he examined the reactor closely. The challenge ahead loomed large, but so did the potential rewards. "I'll need some tools," he said decisively. Sella nodded and pointed toward a storage compartment nearby filled with various engineering tools and parts. As Jeremy gathered what he needed, he couldn't shake off the feeling that this was just the beginning, a prelude to something much larger than himself. With each passing moment aboard Aether's Whisper, Jeremy felt himself becoming more invested in this mission and its crew, a ragtag group bound together by necessity rather than choice but united by their shared goal. As they began working side by side on the reactor repairs, Jeremy discovered that Sella was not just a captain, but also an adept engineer in her own right. Their conversations flowed easily as they tackled problems together. They shared stories about their backgrounds and aspirations. Two people from vastly different worlds finding common ground amidst uncertainty. Hours slipped by as they worked tirelessly on fixing the reactor's issues until finally, Jeremy stepped back to admire their progress. "We might actually pull this off," he said with a grin. Sella chuckled softly, her wings fluttering slightly with excitement. "I knew you had it in you." Just then, an alarm blared throughout the ship, a shrill sound that sent adrenaline coursing through Jeremy's veins. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. Sella's expression shifted from joy to concern as she rushed toward the control panel nearby. "We're receiving an incoming transmission. It might be from the Federation." Panic surged through Jeremy as they both scrambled to assess their situation. The stakes were rising faster than they could prepare for them. "Get ready," Sella ordered sharply as she activated the communication system. Jeremy could feel his heart racing. Whatever happened next would determine not only their mission, but also their very lives aboard this ship, filled with secrets and shadows lurking just beyond their reach. As Sella activated the transmission link, Jeremy braced himself for whatever revelation lay ahead. He was about to find out just how deep into this adventure he had truly signed up for. Life aboard the ship. The Aether's Whisper hummed with life as Jeremy settled into his new role aboard the ship. The initial excitement of joining Sella's crew had quickly morphed into a whirlwind of tasks and responsibilities. He was no longer just a fresh graduate. He was now an integral part of a team navigating the complexities of interstellar travel. Morning routine. Each day began with a familiar ritual. Jeremy would wake before dawn, the soft glow of the ship's lights flickering on as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. The cramped quarters he shared with a couple of other crew members were filled with the sounds of rustling sheets and muted conversations. He would swing his legs over the edge of his bunk, feeling the cool metal floor beneath his feet, and take a moment to gather himself. After donning his work clothes, functional but comfortable, he made his way to the kitchen area. The smell of brewing coffee greeted him, a welcome comfort in this alien environment. He ground some beans and prepared a makeshift breakfast, usually something simple like rehydrated eggs or nutrient bars. As he sat at the table, he noticed the crew buzzing with excitement. They were all eager for their first jump into hyperspace, and their chatter filled the air with anticipation. Sela was already at the helm, her wings neatly tucked behind her back, exuding an air of authority that Jeremy found both intimidating and inspiring. "Are we on schedule?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "Yes," Jeremy replied, feeling a surge of pride. "I'll have the secondary fuel intake port done in 2 hours and the ventral cargo door in another 2. "Good," she nodded, her eyes scanning over various readouts on her tablet. "We need to launch within 5 hours. The pressure was mounting, but Jeremy thrived under it. He had always been one to rise to a challenge, and this was no different. He finished his breakfast quickly and headed down to the ventral cargo area, where he had spent countless hours working on repairs. The cargo bay. The cargo bay was vast and filled with crates stacked haphazardly against one another. Jeremy had learned to navigate its labyrinthine paths quickly. Each corner held potential hazards, but also opportunities for innovation. As he approached the access panel for the ventral cargo door, he felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. "Hey D," he called out to one of his fellow crew members, a Pararan named Dizar who had become somewhat of a friend during their time together. "Can you bring me the number 4 gear for this door?" Dizar flapped his wings gently before gliding over to Jeremy, holding out the gear with a grin. "You're really going to have this done soon?" "Almost there," Jeremy replied as he took the gear from him. "Just need to get this alignment right." As they worked together, Jeremy appreciated Dizar's easygoing nature. It helped ease some of the tension that came with their demanding schedule. The crew dynamics were surprisingly harmonious. Everyone seemed to have their own strengths that complemented one another's weaknesses. The crew. Over time, Jeremy had come to know each member aboard Ether's Whisper. There was Aerie, a medic who looked like a teddy bear come to life. She was fiercely protective and had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was pushing themselves too hard. Then there was Kira, an engineer specializing in navigation systems. Her sharp wit often kept morale high during long shifts. Each crew member brought something unique to the table, different backgrounds, species, and experiences that enriched their collective mission. They shared stories during breaks, bonding over meals that were sometimes more successful than others. One evening, while sitting around a makeshift dinner table made from repurposed materials, Sela shared tales from her early days as a pilot. Her stories were filled with adventure and danger, the kind that made Jeremy's heart race with excitement. Once, she recounted with a glint in her eye, "I had to outrun a pirate ship while carrying medical supplies just like ours." The crew leaned in closer as she continued. "They thought they could take us easily because we were small and unassuming." "What happened?" Jeremy asked eagerly. "We used our size to our advantage," she said with a smirk. "We maneuvered through an asteroid field. They couldn't keep up." As laughter erupted around the table, Jeremy felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging that he hadn't expected when he first boarded the ship. Challenges ahead. However, life aboard Ether's Whisper wasn't without its challenges. The repairs were demanding. Every day brought new obstacles that tested not only their skills, but also their resolve. One afternoon, while working on an engine component in microgravity conditions, Jeremy encountered an unexpected issue. A critical component had malfunctioned. "Sela," he shouted over his comms as he struggled to stabilize himself against the wall, while wrestling with tools that seemed intent on floating away. "What's wrong?" Sela's voice crackled through his earpiece. "The engine control module is fried. We need to replace it before we can even think about launching." Understood. I'll send Kira your way. As he waited for Kira to arrive with the replacement part, anxiety gnawed at him. This wasn't just about fixing machinery. It was about ensuring everyone's safety during their upcoming jump into hyperspace, a leap into uncertainty that could spell disaster if they weren't prepared. When Kira finally arrived, she wasted no time in assessing the situation. "Let's get this done quickly," she said briskly as they worked side by side. With each passing minute spent troubleshooting and repairing under pressure, Jeremy felt adrenaline coursing through him. A reminder that this job was more than just maintenance. It was about survival. The first jump. As launch time approached, tension hung thick in the air like static electricity before a storm. The crew gathered in the cockpit for final checks while Sella went over their flight plan one last time. "Remember," she said firmly but encouragingly, "we're not just transporting supplies, we're delivering hope." Jeremy nodded along with everyone else. They understood what was at stake. This mission meant everything, not just for them, but for those waiting on distant colonies who depended on their success. With engines roaring to life beneath them, and stars stretching out before them like an endless canvas waiting to be painted upon, Jeremy felt exhilaration wash over him once again, a blend of fear and excitement that ignited something deep within him. "Prepare for launch," Sella called out as she initiated countdown procedures. Jeremy took a deep breath as they hurtled forward into hyperspace. This was just the beginning of their adventure aboard Ether's Whisper, and despite all uncertainties ahead, he felt ready for whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. The first jump. The atmosphere aboard the Ether's Whisper was electric as the crew prepared for their first jump into hyperspace. Jeremy felt a mix of excitement and anxiety coursing through him. This was the moment he had been waiting for since he boarded the ship. The repairs were complete, and now they were ready to embark on their mission. Final preparations. In the cockpit, Sella stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the myriad of readouts and controls. "Jeremy, how's the reactor holding up?" she called out, her voice steady despite the palpable tension in the air. "Stable," he replied, glancing at the monitor displaying the reactor status. "We're good to go." "Excellent. Kira, initiate pre-jump protocols," Sella ordered, her tone authoritative yet encouraging. Kira, seated at her navigation console, nodded and began inputting commands. "Jump coordinates set. We're ready when you are." As they moved through their final checks, Jeremy took a moment to observe his crewmates. Each member was focused on their tasks, but there was an underlying camaraderie that made him feel at home. He had quickly learned that they were not just colleagues, they were a family forged through shared experiences and challenges. "All right, everyone," Sella announced, her voice cutting through the hum of machinery. "This is our first jump together. Let's make it count." Cheers erupted from the crew, and Jeremy felt a surge of adrenaline as anticipation built within him. This was it, the moment he had dreamed of since he decided to become an engineer. The jump. Engaging hyperspace drive in 3, 2, 1. Sella counted down, her hands gripping the controls tightly. The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, and Jeremy felt a familiar sensation wash over him. The exhilarating rush of acceleration as Ether's Whisper surged forward into the void of space. For a brief moment, everything seemed to blur around them, the stars stretching into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. Jeremy couldn't help but smile. This was what he had always wanted, freedom among the stars. But then, without warning, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Sella, what's happening?" Jeremy shouted over the cacophony of noise. "Hold on. We've got an anomaly ahead," she replied, her voice strained as she wrestled with the controls. The ship jolted violently, throwing Jeremy against his console. He gripped it tightly to steady himself as panic surged through him. "What do we do?" "Brace for impact," Sella shouted just before everything went dark. The aftermath. When Jeremy regained consciousness, he found himself sprawled on the floor of the cockpit. The lights flickered erratically overhead, casting eerie shadows across the room. Dazed and disoriented, he pushed himself up and surveyed the damage. "Sella," he called out weakly. "I'm here," she replied from her seat at the helm, her voice shaky but determined. "Status report." Kira was already assessing their navigation systems. "We've lost power to several systems. The jump caused a cascade failure in our reactor." "What about our location?" Sella pressed urgently. "We're off course, farther out than we should be," Kira said grimly. "It'll take time to recalibrate." Jeremy's heart raced as he processed this information. They were stranded in uncharted space with no clear way back home. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sella took a deep breath and steadied herself. "We need to stabilize our systems first before we can think about getting back on track." Working together. As they worked together to restore power and functionality to their ship, Jeremy felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over him. This was what being part of a crew meant, facing challenges head-on and relying on one another's strengths. Hours passed as they battled against malfunctioning equipment and dwindling resources. Jeremy found himself in his element, repairing circuits and rerouting power where necessary. With each small victory came a boost of morale. They were making progress despite their dire situation. "Jeremy," Ari called out from engineering as she monitored their life support systems. "We're running low on oxygen. We need to find a way to boost our reserves." "I'm on it," he replied determinedly, racing down to engineering where Ari was working frantically at her station. Together, they assessed their oxygen recycling system, a complex web of filters and pumps that had been damaged during their jump. As they worked side by side, Jeremy felt grateful for Ari's unwavering support. She kept him focused even when doubt crept into his mind. With Ari's guidance and his engineering skills combined, they managed to restore oxygen levels just in time for Sella's next update. A new challenge. As they stabilized their systems and regained control over Aether's whisper, Sella gathered everyone in the cockpit for a briefing. "We're still off course," she began gravely, "but we have enough power now to send out a distress signal." "What if no one responds?" Kira asked anxiously. Jeremy could see determination etched on everyone's faces. This crew had come together in ways he never expected. They were more than just colleagues. They were friends fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. As they sent out their distress signal into the void of space, Jeremy felt a sense of unity among them, a bond forged through adversity that would carry them forward no matter what lay ahead. Unexpected allies. Days turned into weeks as they drifted through uncharted territory, with no sign of rescue or return home. Just when hope began to wane, an unexpected signal crackled through their comm system. A response. Sella quickly responded with relief evident in her tone. "Thank you for answering. We've been stranded after an anomaly during our jump." "We'll guide you back," Captain Ilara assured them. "But we need you to prepare for boarding procedures." As the Starfall approached with its sleek design contrasting sharply against Aether's whisper, Jeremy felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension wash over him. Homeward bound. Once aboard the Starfall, Jeremy and his crew were welcomed warmly by Captain Ilara and her team. A diverse group that mirrored their own experiences aboard Aether's whisper. They shared stories over meals about their respective journeys through space, their struggles and triumphs echoing each other's tales. After several days aboard the Starfall, it was time for them to return home, back toward familiar territory, where they could finally breathe easy again after weeks spent adrift in uncertainty. As the Starfall set course for Juman Spaceport once more, Jeremy looked around at his crewmates. Each one had grown stronger through this ordeal, and realized how much he had changed too. He wasn't just an apprentice engineer anymore. He was part of something bigger than himself, a family forged by trials faced together among distant stars. Reflections. Upon returning safely to Juman Spaceport amidst cheers from fellow crew members who awaited their arrival eagerly, Jeremy felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment wash over him, a culmination of everything he had worked toward since leaving Earth behind all those months ago. As he stepped off the starfall, ready to embrace whatever came next, whether it be new adventures or opportunities, he knew one thing for certain: this journey had only just begun. In that moment under starlit skies, filled with possibilities stretching infinitely before him like galaxies waiting to be explored further still, he was ready for whatever lay ahead among those vast cosmic horizons, an interstellar builder embarking on endless adventures yet untold.